The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty Afghan mountains as Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell adjusted her rifle scope for what felt like the 100th time. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility that had been thrust upon her shoulders just 3 months earlier. At 24, she was the youngest sniper ever assigned to support SEAL operations in this volatile region, and every day brought new challenges that tested not just her marksmanship skills, but her resolve as a human being. The radio crackled to life in her earpiece, breaking through the relative quiet of her elevated position on a rocky outcrop overlooking the valley below. "Overwatch, this is Alpha Team. We're moving into position for reconnaissance on the suspected weapons cache. Maintain visual on R6 and the surrounding area." Sarah pressed the transmit button on her radio. "Copy that, Alpha Team. I have clear sight lines on your approach and the surrounding hills. All quiet from up here." She had been in this position since before dawn, carefully concealing herself among the rocks and sparse vegetation that dotted the mountainside. Her ghillie suit blended perfectly with the terrain, making her nearly invisible to anyone scanning the area below. This was her element, the place where months of intensive training had prepared her to excel. Yet despite her technical proficiency, something about this mission felt different from the others. Through her scope, Sarah watched as 6 Navy SEALs moved with practiced precision through the narrow valley below. Their leader, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez, had been working these mountains for over 8 years. He moved like a man who understood every rock, every shadow, every potential hiding spot that could conceal an enemy fighter. Behind him followed 5 other operators, each one a seasoned veteran with multiple deployments under their belt. Sarah had worked with this team for only 2 months, but she had quickly learned to respect their expertise and dedication. They trusted her to watch their backs, and she had never let them down. Today, however, something in the air felt heavy with anticipation, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. The mission briefing had been straightforward enough. Intelligence suggested that a significant weapons cache was hidden in a compound at the far end of the valley. The compound consisted of several mud brick buildings clustered around a central courtyard, typical of rural Afghan architecture. What made this particular cache important was the intelligence indicating it contained advanced explosive devices that had been used in recent attacks against coalition forces. As Sarah monitored the team's progress, she found herself thinking about the letter she had received from her younger brother just 2 days earlier. David was a senior in high school back in Ohio, captain of the wrestling team, and planning to attend college on an academic scholarship. His letter had been filled with excitement about an upcoming match and questions about her experiences overseas. She had not yet found the words to explain to him what this place was really like, how it changed a person in ways that were difficult to articulate. The weight of her rifle felt reassuring against her shoulder as she tracked the SEAL team through her scope. Each member of the squad moved with the fluid coordination that came from countless hours of training together. They communicated through hand signals and brief radio transmissions, advancing steadily toward their objective while remaining alert to potential threats. Sarah's position gave her an excellent view of not just the team's immediate area, but also the surrounding hills and approaches to the valley. Her role was crucial. She served as their eyes and ears, watching for any movement that might indicate the presence of enemy fighters. In this terrain, with its countless hiding spots and elevated positions, a single sniper could provide early warning that might mean the difference between mission success and disaster. As the morning progressed, Sarah noticed something that made her pause. Far to the east, barely visible through her scope, she caught a glimpse of movement along a ridgeline that should have been empty. She adjusted her position slightly and focused her attention on that area, studying it carefully through her optics. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just the same rocky terrain and sparse vegetation that characterized the entire region. Then, she saw it again, a brief flash of movement, so quick that someone less experienced might have dismissed it as wind stirring the brush or perhaps a wild animal. But Sarah's training had taught her to trust her instincts, and something about that movement struck her as distinctly human. She pressed her radio transmit button. "Alpha Team, this is Overwatch. I may have movement on the eastern ridgeline, approximately 800 meters from your current position. Investigating further." Chief Rodriguez's voice came back immediately. "Copy, Overwatch. We'll hold position while you confirm." Sarah adjusted her scope's magnification and began a systematic scan of the eastern ridge. Her breathing slowed as she entered the focused state that her instructors had drilled into her during months of training. This was the moment where all those hours on the firing range, all those exercises in target identification, would either prove their worth or reveal their limitations. After several minutes of careful observation, Sarah spotted them. 3 figures, well concealed among the rocks, moving slowly along the ridgeline in a pattern that suggested they were conducting their own reconnaissance of the valley. Their positioning and movement indicated they were likely enemy fighters, possibly preparing to set up their own observation post or planning an ambush. Alpha Team, I have confirmation of 3 individuals on the eastern ridge. They appear to be conducting surveillance of your area of operations. Recommend you adjust your approach route to maintain concealment. Rodriguez's voice carried a note of concern. Understood, Overwatch. Can you maintain observation on those individuals while we continue with the mission? Affirmative. I'll keep eyes on them and alert you to any changes in their disposition. This was the kind of situation that separated experienced snipers from those who were merely good shots. Sarah needed to simultaneously track multiple potential threats while providing support to the team below, all while remaining concealed in her own position. The slightest error in judgment could compromise not just the mission, but the lives of 6 highly trained operators who were counting on her vigilance. As the SEAL team adjusted their route and continued toward the target compound, Sarah found herself dividing her attention between their progress and the 3 figures on the distant ridge. The enemy fighters seemed content to observe for now, but their presence added a new layer of complexity to an already challenging operation. The morning heat was beginning to build, and Sarah could feel sweat gathering beneath her ghillie suit despite the altitude. She took a careful sip of water from her hydration system, never taking her eyes off either the SEAL team or the potential threats she had identified. This was the reality of her role, long hours of intense concentration, where a moment's inattention could have catastrophic consequences. Through her scope, she watched as Chief Rodriguez and his team reached a position where they could begin their detailed reconnaissance of the target compound. The buildings appeared quiet, with no obvious signs of activity, but Sarah knew that appearances could be deceiving in this environment. Enemy fighters were experts at concealment, often waiting motionless for hours before revealing their presence. As the morning progressed toward noon, Sarah noticed additional movement in the area. 2 more figures appeared on a different section of the ridgeline, and what appeared to be several individuals moving among the buildings of a small village approximately 1 kilometer to the north of the target compound. The tactical situation was becoming increasingly complex, with potential threats emerging from multiple directions. Sarah keyed her radio again. Alpha Team, be advised I now have multiple groups of individuals in the area. 3 on the eastern ridge as previously reported, 2 more on a northern approach, and possible movement in the village to your north. The situation is developing. Rodriguez's response was immediate and professional. Copy all, Overwatch. We're going to accelerate our timeline and complete the reconnaissance quickly. Maintain surveillance on all identified threats and be prepared to provide covering fire if necessary. The weight of responsibility settled even more heavily on Sarah's shoulders. In training, scenarios were controlled and predictable. Here, with real lives at stake and an evolving tactical situation, every decision carried potentially fatal consequences. She had trained for this moment, but no amount of preparation could fully simulate the psychological pressure of actual combat operations. Sarah adjusted her position slightly to get a better angle on the various groups she was monitoring. Her rifle was equipped with a high-powered scope that allowed her to see clearly at distances that would challenge even experienced observers with binoculars. This technological advantage, combined with her elevated position, gave her a unique perspective on the developing situation. As she watched, Sarah began to notice patterns in the movement of the various groups. The 3 figures on the eastern ridge seemed to be coordinating with the 2 on the northern approach, using hand signals that suggested they were experienced fighters working together as a team. The movement in the distant village appeared more random, possibly indicating civilians going about their daily routines, but she couldn't rule out the possibility that some of those individuals were also hostile. The SEAL team below had reached the outer perimeter of the target compound and was beginning their detailed examination of the buildings. This was the most vulnerable phase of their mission, as they would need to move methodically through the structures while remaining alert to potential threats from all directions. Sarah's role now became even more critical, as she needed to provide early warning of any hostile movement that might threaten the team while they were focused on their immediate objectives. Through her scope, Sarah could see Chief Rodriguez directing his team with the calm professionalism that had made him respected throughout the special operations community. Each SEAL moved with purpose, checking corners and potential hiding spots with the thoroughness that their training demanded. Their discipline and teamwork were evident in every movement, a testament to the countless hours they had spent preparing for exactly this type of operation. As the day continued, Sarah found herself thinking about the complexity of modern warfare. Unlike the conventional battles of previous generations, today's conflicts often involved small units operating independently in remote locations, facing threats that could emerge from any direction at any time. The responsibility placed on individual operators was enormous, requiring not just technical skill but also the ability to make split-second decisions under extreme pressure. The radio crackled again. "Overwatch, this is Alpha Team. We've located the weapons cache and are beginning documentation. Request continued surveillance on surrounding area. Copy, Alpha Team. I maintain observation on all identified threats. No change in their disposition at this time." Sarah's scope moved systematically between the various groups she was monitoring. The discipline required to maintain this level of vigilance hour after hour was something that could only be developed through extensive training and experience. Her instructors had emphasized that a sniper's most important weapon was not their rifle, but their ability to observe and analyze the battlefield with clarity and precision. As she watched, Sarah noticed that one of the figures on the eastern ridge had disappeared from view. She immediately focused her attention on that area, searching for any indication of where the individual might have gone. This kind of sudden change in the tactical situation was exactly what she had been trained to watch for, as it often preceded some type of hostile action. After several minutes of careful observation, Sarah spotted movement much closer to the SEAL team's position. The missing figure had apparently used concealment to move significantly closer to the target compound, positioning himself where he might be able to observe or even interfere with the team's operations. This development represented a significant escalation in the threat level. "Alpha Team, this is Overwatch. One of the individuals from the eastern ridge has moved to a position much closer to your location. I have him under observation approximately 300 meters to your northeast, among the rocks near the dry creek bed." Rodriguez's voice carried a note of concern. "Copy, Overwatch. Can you maintain eyes on that individual while we complete our work here?" "Affirmative. I have a clear line of sight and will advise immediately if his behavior changes." This was the kind of situation that tested every aspect of Sarah's training. She needed to track a potential threat while simultaneously maintaining awareness of the other groups she had identified, all while remaining prepared to provide accurate covering fire if the situation deteriorated. The level of concentration required was intense, demanding every ounce of her focus and attention. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the rocky terrain as Sarah maintained her vigil from the mountainside. Through her scope, she could see the SEAL team working methodically through the compound below, their movements precise and professional despite the growing complexity of the tactical situation. What had started as a routine reconnaissance mission was rapidly evolving into something far more dangerous. Sarah's concentration was absolute as she tracked the lone figure who had separated from the group on the eastern ridge. The individual had taken position in a cluster of boulders that provided excellent concealment while offering a clear view of the compound where the SEAL team was working. His stillness and the way he had maneuvered into position suggested military training, possibly a former soldier or someone with significant combat experience. The radio in her ear remained quiet as the team below continued their documentation of the weapons cache. Sarah knew that Chief Rodriguez and his men were likely finding exactly what intelligence had suggested: advanced explosive devices and possibly weapons that could cause significant damage to coalition forces if they remained in enemy hands. The importance of this mission extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation, potentially preventing future attacks that could claim dozens of lives. As Sarah continued her surveillance, she noticed subtle changes in the behavior of the other groups she was monitoring. The two figures on the northern approach had begun moving more deliberately, no longer content to simply observe from their distant positions. Their movement pattern suggested they were attempting to establish a more advantageous position, possibly preparing for some type of coordinated action. Sarah keyed her radio with growing concern. "Alpha Team, this is Overwatch. The tactical situation is developing. The two individuals on the northern approach are now moving toward your position, and I maintain eyes on the single individual who moved closer earlier. Recommend you expedite your timeline." Rodriguez's voice came back immediately, calm but with an underlying tension that Sarah could detect. "Copy, Overwatch. We're nearly finished here. Can you provide an estimate of how long before any of these individuals might reach a position where they could engage us?" Sarah quickly calculated distances and movement rates based on the terrain and the pace she was observing. At their current rate of movement, the two from the north will reach effective small arms range in approximately 15 minutes. The single individual to your northeast is already in position where he could observe or potentially engage your location. The weight of responsibility pressed down on Sarah's shoulders like a physical force. 6 highly trained operators were depending on her vigilance and judgment to keep them safe while they completed their mission. The knowledge that her observations and decisions could mean the difference between their safe return and potential disaster was something that no amount of training could fully prepare someone for. Through her scope, Sarah watched as the SEAL team began preparing to withdraw from the compound. Their movements remained controlled and professional, but she could detect the subtle increase in urgency that came with the knowledge that potential threats were converging on their position. Each man checked his equipment and prepared for movement with the efficiency that came from countless hours of training and real-world experience. As the team prepared to move, Sarah noticed something that sent a chill down her spine. The single individual who had positioned himself near the dry creek bed was no longer alone. 2 additional figures had appeared in the same area, moving with the same careful precision that suggested military training. What had been a single potential threat had suddenly become a 3-person team in an ideal position to ambush the SEAL team as they withdrew from the compound. "Alpha Team, this is Overwatch. The situation has escalated. The single individual near the creek bed now has 2 additional personnel with him. You potentially have a 3-person team in position to engage your withdrawal route." Rodriguez's response came back with the controlled urgency of an experienced operator facing a developing crisis. "Copy, Overwatch. Can you provide an alternative withdrawal route, or do we need to address this threat directly?" Sarah quickly scanned the surrounding terrain through her scope, looking for routes that might allow the team to withdraw without passing through the area dominated by the 3-person threat team. The geography of the valley limited their options significantly. The compound was situated in a natural bottleneck, with steep terrain on both sides that would be difficult to traverse quickly while carrying equipment and maintaining tactical formation. "Alpha Team, the terrain limits your options significantly. The most viable alternative route would require you to move approximately 800 meters to the west before turning north, which would add significant time and distance to your withdrawal. That route would also take you closer to the village where I've observed additional movement." Sarah could hear the tension in Rodriguez's voice as he processed this information. "Understood, Overwatch. Stand by while we evaluate our options." As the SEAL team huddled briefly to discuss their tactical options, Sarah maintained her surveillance of all the groups she had identified. The situation was becoming increasingly complex by the minute, with potential threats positioned at multiple points around the valley. Her training had prepared her for exactly this type of scenario, but the reality of managing multiple potential engagements while supporting a team in contact was far more challenging than any exercise. Through her scope, Sarah could see the 3 individuals near the creek bed were now clearly positioning themselves for some type of action. They had separated slightly, taking positions that would give them overlapping fields of fire on the most likely withdrawal routes from the compound. Their movements were coordinated and purposeful, leaving little doubt about their hostile intentions. The 2 figures from the northern approach had also continued their advance, now reaching positions where they could potentially engage the compound or any withdrawal attempt. Sarah found herself tracking 5 different individuals whose movements suggested they were part of a coordinated effort to trap or engage the SEAL team. "Alpha Team, this is Overwatch. The tactical picture continues to deteriorate. I now have 5 individuals in positions where they could potentially engage your position or withdrawal routes. Recommend immediate withdrawal with Overwatch support. Rodriguez's voice carried the weight of command decision. Copy, Overwatch. We're beginning immediate withdrawal. Be prepared to provide covering fire if necessary. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as the situation moved toward potential combat. Her role was about to shift from passive observation to active engagement, requiring her to make split-second decisions about when and where to engage threats while ensuring she didn't inadvertently compromise the SEAL team's position or movement. Through her scope, she watched as the 6-man team began their withdrawal from the compound, moving in a tactical formation that provided mutual support while maintaining alertness to threats from all directions. Chief Rodriguez took the lead, using hand signals to coordinate his team's movement while maintaining radio communication with Sarah in her Overwatch position. As the team began moving through the valley, Sarah noticed immediate reaction from the hostile groups she had been monitoring. The 3 individuals near the creek bed began moving to intercept the withdrawal route, while the 2 from the northern approach adjusted their positions to maintain observation and potential engagement capability. Sarah's training kicked in as she prepared for the possibility of having to engage multiple targets in a complex tactical environment. Her rifle was already positioned and ready, with additional ammunition readily accessible. The scope was properly adjusted for the various ranges involved, and she had calculated the holdovers necessary for engaging targets at different distances in the current wind conditions. Alpha Team, the hostile groups are reacting to your movement. The 3 near the creek bed are moving to intercept your route, and the 2 from the north are maintaining overwatch on your movement. I'm prepared to provide covering fire on your command. Rodriguez acknowledged her transmission while continuing to lead his team through the challenging terrain. The SEAL team's movement was masterful, utilizing every piece of available cover and concealment while maintaining a pace that balanced speed with tactical soundness. Each man knew his role and executed it with the precision that came from extensive training and real-world experience. As Sarah watched the tactical situation develop, she found herself mentally preparing for what might be her first combat engagement. All those hours on the firing range, all those exercises with moving targets and complex scenarios, had been leading to this moment. The weight of her rifle felt familiar and reassuring, but she knew that engaging human targets in a real-world situation would be fundamentally different from any training she had received. The distance between the SEAL team and the hostile groups was steadily decreasing as both sides maneuvered through the valley. Sarah could see through her scope that the 3 individuals near the creek bed were now in positions where they could potentially engage the withdrawing team within the next few minutes. Their movements suggested they were experienced fighters who understood how to use terrain to their advantage. Alpha Team, the 3 individuals near the creek bed are now in position to potentially engage your route in approximately 2 minutes. The 2 from the north maintain overwatch positions. I have clear sight lines on all targets and am prepared to engage on your command. Sarah's breathing had become controlled and steady, entering the focused state that her instructors had drilled into her during months of training. This was the moment where all that preparation would either prove sufficient or reveal its limitations. The lives of 6 highly trained operators were potentially depending on her ability to accurately engage multiple targets in a complex tactical environment. Through her scope, she could see the lead elements of the SEAL team approaching the area where the 3 hostile individuals were positioned. The tactical geometry was becoming increasingly dangerous, with the potential for engagement from multiple directions simultaneously. Sarah's position gave her the ability to engage the threats near the creek bed, but the 2 individuals maintaining overwatch positions from the north would be more challenging targets due to range and terrain features. As the distance continued to close, Sarah noticed that one of the 3 individuals near the creek bed was now carrying what appeared to be an assault rifle, confirming her assessment that these were indeed hostile combatants rather than curious civilians. The weapon was being handled with familiarity, suggesting training and experience that made these individuals a significant threat to the withdrawing SEAL team. Alpha Team, I can confirm at least 1 weapon among the 3 individuals near the creek bed. They appear to be positioning for imminent engagement of your withdrawal route. Rodriguez's voice came back with controlled urgency. Understood, Overwatch. We're going to alter our route slightly to avoid the most dangerous area, but we may need covering fire within the next few minutes. Sarah adjusted her position to maintain optimal sightlines on the developing situation while preparing for the possibility of engaging multiple targets in rapid succession. Her training had emphasized the importance of target prioritization in complex engagements, focusing first on the most immediate threats while maintaining awareness of secondary dangers that might develop. The tactical situation was now reaching a critical point where engagement seemed inevitable. Sarah could see through her scope that the hostile individuals were clearly preparing for action, with weapons being readied and positions being adjusted for optimal engagement angles. The SEAL team below was moving as quickly as possible while maintaining tactical discipline, but the geography of the valley was limiting their options significantly. As Sarah watched the final moments before potential contact, she thought briefly about her family back home in Ohio. Her parents had been worried about her deployment, and her younger brother David had asked her to promise that she would be careful. In a few minutes, that promise might be tested in ways she had never fully anticipated when she made it. The moments Sarah had trained for arrived with devastating suddenness. Through her scope, she watched as the three hostile individuals near the creek bed simultaneously raised their weapons, their movements coordinated and purposeful. The trap they had been setting was about to spring, and the SEAL team was walking directly into the kill zone they had carefully prepared. Contact front. Chief Rodriguez's voice exploded through the radio as automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions around the valley. The sharp crack of assault rifles echoed off the rocky walls, creating a chaotic symphony of violence that shattered the afternoon calm. Sarah's training took over instantly. Her breathing steadied, her heart rate actually seemed to slow, and the world narrowed to the precise circle visible through her rifle scope. Time seemed to stretch as she acquired her first target, one of the three fighters positioned near the creek bed who was directing concentrated fire at the pinned SEAL team below. The crosshairs settled on center mass of the hostile fighter, and Sarah's finger found the trigger. The fundamental marksmanship principles drilled into her during months of training guided her movements. Sight alignment, breathing control, trigger squeeze, everything had to be perfect. Lives depended on the accuracy of this shot. The rifle bucked against her shoulder as she fired, the sharp report echoing across the valley. Through her scope, she watched the target drop immediately, the precise shot having found its mark at a distance of over 400 meters. There was no time for reflection or emotion. Two more immediate threats required her attention as the firefight intensified below. Overwatch, good hit. Rodriguez's voice came through the radio even as he directed his team's response to the ambush. We're taking fire from multiple positions. Can you suppress the remaining threats near the creek bed? Sarah was already acquiring her second target, another fighter who had taken position behind a large boulder and was directing sustained fire at the SEAL team's location. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly, with the team caught in an increasingly complex crossfire from positions that had been carefully prepared and coordinated. Her second shot rang out across the valley, and another hostile fighter ceased fire permanently. The remaining fighter near the creek bed immediately shifted position, recognizing that their positions had been compromised by accurate sniper fire from an unknown location. Sarah tracked his movement through her scope, waiting for a clear shot while maintaining awareness of the other threats that were still actively engaging the team below. The two fighters positioned on the northern approach had opened fire as well, creating a crossfire that trapped the SEAL team in the middle of the valley with limited options for cover or movement. Their position was becoming untenable, and Sarah knew that her ability to suppress or eliminate these threats might be the determining factor in whether the team could successfully withdraw from this engagement. Alpha Team, I've neutralized 2 targets near the creek bed. The third has taken cover, but I maintain observation. The 2 from the north are still active and engaging your position. I'm going to shift fire to suppress them. Rodriguez's response came between bursts of return fire from his team. Copy, Overwatch. We're going to attempt to break contact and move to better cover. Suppress those northern positions if possible. Sarah quickly adjusted her scope's 0 for the longer range to the northern positions, calculating the necessary holdover for the increased distance and elevated angle. These shots would be more challenging, requiring her to engage targets at nearly 600 meters while they were actively moving and seeking cover. The margin for error was minimal, but the alternative was watching the SEAL team become casualties in an ambush that had been expertly planned and executed. Through her scope, Sarah could see that the SEAL team was executing a fighting withdrawal, using fire and movement tactics to break contact with the hostile forces while attempting to reach better defensive positions. Each man was performing his role with the disciplined precision that marked elite special operations forces, but they were facing experienced fighters who had chosen the battlefield and prepared it carefully for exactly this type of engagement. Sarah's third shot targeted one of the fighters on the northern approach, a long-range engagement that required her to account for multiple environmental factors including wind drift and bullet drop. The shot was successful, causing the hostile fighter to cease engaging the team below, though she couldn't confirm whether he had been eliminated or simply suppressed by the accurate long-range fire. The remaining fighter on the northern approach immediately recognized the threat posed by Sarah's position and began directing fire in her general direction. Bullets began impacting the rocks around her position, sending chips of stone flying and forcing her to adjust her own location while maintaining effective observation and fire support for the team below. "Overwatch, are you taking fire?" Rodriguez's voice carried concern even as he continued directing his team's tactical movement. "Affirmative, Alpha Team. I'm receiving sporadic fire from the remaining northern position, but I can still provide overwatch and fire support. Continue your movement to better cover." Sarah low-crawled approximately 20 meters to a new firing position that offered better concealment while maintaining the sight lines she needed to support the SEAL team. The hostile fighter's return fire was accurate enough to be concerning, suggesting training and experience that made him a formidable opponent even at extended range. From her new position, Sarah could see that the tactical situation was beginning to stabilize somewhat. The SEAL team had reached a position with better cover and fields of fire, allowing them to more effectively engage the remaining threats while preparing for continued withdrawal from the area. The elimination of 3 hostile fighters had significantly reduced the immediate threat, but the situation remained dangerous with additional unknowns in the surrounding area. Through her scope, Sarah noticed movement in the village to the north that she had been monitoring throughout the day. Several figures were moving with purpose between the buildings, and she could detect what appeared to be weapons among at least some of them. The tactical situation that had seemed to be stabilizing was about to become more complex as additional hostile forces prepared to join the engagement. "Alpha Team, be advised I'm seeing movement in the village to your north. Multiple individuals, at least some appear to be armed. Possible reinforcements for the hostile forces already in contact." Rodriguez's response reflected the gravity of this development. "Copy, Overwatch. How many additional personnel are we potentially dealing with?" Sarah studied the village carefully through her scope, trying to get an accurate count while the figures moved between buildings and used the terrain to their advantage. "I count at least 6 additional individuals, possibly more. They appear to be organizing for movement in your direction." The radio crackled with tension as Rodriguez processed this information and communicated with his team. "Understood. We're going to accelerate our withdrawal. Can you continue to provide overwatch and engage targets of opportunity?" "Affirmative, Alpha Team. I have good sightlines on multiple approach routes and sufficient ammunition for continued engagement." Sarah's assessment of her ammunition situation was accurate but concerning. She had expended 3 rounds from her primary weapon, leaving her with 17 rounds of match-grade ammunition specifically loaded for long-range precision work. Additionally, she carried a sidearm with 3 magazines, but that weapon would be of limited utility given the ranges involved in this engagement. As the SEAL team began their accelerated withdrawal, the remaining hostile forces attempted to maintain contact and prevent their escape. The fighter who had been engaging Sarah's position shifted his attention back to the team below, recognizing that preventing their withdrawal was more important than suppressing the sniper who had been causing casualties among his comrades. Sarah seized this opportunity to engage the remaining fighter on the northern approach, taking a carefully aimed shot that eliminated the threat permanently. Her 4th shot of the engagement was another successful hit at extended range, demonstrating the effectiveness of her training and the quality of her equipment under actual combat conditions. "Alpha Team, northern threats have been neutralized. You should have a clear withdrawal route to the west, but be advised those additional personnel from the village are still moving in your direction." Rodriguez acknowledged her transmission while continuing to direct his team's movement. The 6 SEAL operators were now moving more rapidly through the valley, using the temporary respite created by Sarah's accurate fire to gain distance from the ambush site and reach terrain that would favor their withdrawal rather than pursuit by hostile forces. Through her scope, Sarah continued to monitor the village where the additional hostile forces were organizing. She could see that they were indeed preparing to pursue the withdrawing SEAL team, with several individuals now clearly visible carrying assault rifles and other military equipment. The size of this group suggested that the original ambush had been part of a larger planned operation designed to trap and eliminate the American Special Operations Team. Sarah keyed her radio again. Alpha Team, the group from the village is now moving in organized pursuit. I count 8 individuals, all appear to be armed. They're moving to intercept your withdrawal route approximately 1 kilometer to your west. This information presented Rodriguez and his team with a significant tactical problem. Their withdrawal route was about to be compromised by a larger force that had been held in reserve during the initial ambush. The team would need to either engage this new threat directly or find an alternative route that might expose them to other dangers in the surrounding mountains. Overwatch, can you engage any of those personnel to disrupt their movement? Sarah studied the pursuing group through her scope, calculating ranges and considering shot placement that might have the maximum psychological impact on their organization and movement. The group was moving in a relatively tight formation that presented opportunities for effective engagement, but the ranges were at the limit of her weapon's effective capability. Affirmative, Alpha Team. I can engage selected targets to disrupt their pursuit, but I'll need to relocate to maintain effective range as they advance. Sarah's 5th shot of the engagement targeted what appeared to be the leader of the pursuing group, a figure who was directing the others' movement and appeared to be carrying a radio for communication with other elements. The shot was successful, causing immediate confusion and hesitation among the remaining members of the group as they sought cover and tried to determine where the sniper fire was originating. The psychological impact of accurate long-range sniper fire on a moving group could be devastating, often causing much larger forces to become cautious and hesitant in their movements. Sarah's single well-placed shot had effectively disrupted the organized pursuit of the SEAL team, buying them precious time to continue their withdrawal to safer terrain. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah found herself in a dynamic engagement where she needed to continuously relocate to maintain effective fields of fire while supporting the SEAL team's withdrawal. The rocky terrain of her position provided good concealment and multiple firing positions, but each move required careful consideration of sight lines, range calculations, and escape routes should her position become untenable. The hostile forces in the valley had been significantly disrupted by her intervention, but Sarah knew that additional threats could emerge at any time. The intelligence picture for this area was incomplete, and the coordinated nature of the initial ambush suggested a level of planning and preparation that indicated significant enemy presence in the surrounding mountains. Through her scope, Sarah watched as the SEAL team reached terrain that favored their continued withdrawal while making pursuit more difficult for any remaining hostile forces. Chief Rodriguez and his men had performed with the professionalism and skill that characterized elite special operations forces, adapting to a complex and dangerous situation while completing their mission and avoiding casualties despite being caught in a carefully prepared ambush. The silence that followed the intense firefight felt almost deafening after hours of radio chatter and weapons fire echoing through the valley. Sarah remained in her elevated position, scope trained on the areas where hostile forces had last been observed, watching for any signs of continued threat or pursuit of the SEAL team that was now moving through safer terrain toward their extraction point. Through her earpiece, she could hear Chief Rodriguez conducting a radio check with his team members, confirming that all 6 operators were accounted for and had sustained no serious injuries during the engagement. The professional relief in his voice was evident, though Sarah knew that the mission would not be considered complete until everyone had reached the extraction site and returned safely to base. Overwatch, this is Alpha Team. We've reached the rally point and are preparing for extraction. What's your status and the disposition of hostile forces in the area? Sarah continued her systematic scan of the valley through her rifle scope before responding. Alpha Team, I maintain overwatch on the area. The immediate threats have been neutralized or suppressed. The group that was pursuing from the village has taken cover and appears to be regrouping, but they've ceased active pursuit of your position. The tactical situation had stabilized significantly since the height of the engagement, but Sarah knew that enemy forces in this region were often persistent and well organized. The coordinated nature of the initial ambush suggested a level of planning that indicated this had not been a chance encounter, but rather a deliberately planned operation targeting coalition special operations forces. As Sarah maintained her vigilance, she found herself reflecting on the events of the past few hours. When she had taken her position on the mountainside before dawn, she had expected a routine overwatch mission supporting a standard reconnaissance operation. Instead, she had found herself in an intense combat engagement where her decisions and marksmanship had directly contributed to saving the lives of 6 elite operators. The weight of what had transpired was beginning to settle on her shoulders as the immediate adrenaline of combat began to subside. Sarah had fired 5 shots during the engagement, and each one had found its target with the precision that months of intensive training had developed. The effectiveness of her intervention had been decisive in allowing the SEAL team to break contact and withdraw safely from what could have been a catastrophic ambush. Through her scope, Sarah continued to monitor the village where the pursuing group had originated. She could see figures moving between the buildings, but their movements appeared cautious and disorganized compared to the purposeful advance they had demonstrated earlier. The psychological impact of accurate long-range sniper fire had clearly affected their willingness to continue aggressive pursuit of the American forces. Overwatch, we have helicopter inbound for extraction in 15 minutes. Can you maintain observation until we're airborne? Sarah keyed her radio immediately. Affirmative, Alpha Team. I'll maintain overwatch until you're safely extracted, then withdraw to my own extraction point. The extraction site for the SEAL team was located approximately 2 kilometers from Sarah's position, in an area of relatively flat terrain that could accommodate helicopter operations. Sarah's own extraction would occur from a different location, accessed by a route that would keep her concealed from any remaining hostile forces in the area. As the sound of approaching helicopters began to echo off the mountain walls, Sarah noticed increased movement in the village and surrounding areas. Enemy forces often attempted to engage helicopter extraction operations with rocket-propelled grenades or heavy weapons, recognizing that aircraft were particularly vulnerable during landing and takeoff operations. Alpha Team, be advised I'm seeing increased movement in the village and surrounding areas. Possible preparation for engagement of extraction aircraft. Recommend heightened security during landing operations. Rodriguez's acknowledgement came through the radio as the helicopters approached the extraction site. Copy, Overwatch. We'll maintain security perimeter during extraction and advise aircrew of potential threats. Through her scope, Sarah watched as 2 military helicopters approached the extraction site at low altitude, using the terrain to mask their approach and minimize exposure to potential ground fire. The pilots were clearly experienced in these types of operations, demonstrating the skill and precision that characterized all aspects of special operations missions. As the first helicopter flared for landing, Sarah detected movement on a ridgeline approximately 1 kilometer from the extraction site. Through her scope, she could see what appeared to be an individual carrying a long, tube-shaped object that looked very much like a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, exactly the type of weapon that posed the greatest threat to aircraft during extraction operations. Alpha Team, I have an individual with what appears to be an RPG approximately 1 kilometer southeast of your extraction site. He's moving to a position where he could engage the aircraft. Sarah's heart rate increased as she realized she was about to engage a target that posed an immediate threat to both the SEAL team and the aircrews that had come to extract them. The range to this new target was nearly 700 meters, at the very limit of her weapon's effective range under these conditions, but she was the only person in position to neutralize this threat before it could be employed against the helicopters. Overwatch, can you engage that target? Sarah was already adjusting her scope and calculating the holdover required for this extremely long-range shot. Wind conditions had changed since her earlier engagements, and the angle to the target was more severe than any she had attempted during the current mission. Everything about this shot would push the limits of her equipment and training. Alpha Team, I'm engaging the RPG threat now. Sarah's breathing slowed as she entered the focused state that her instructors had drilled into her during countless hours of training. The crosshairs settled on the figure with the rocket-propelled grenade launcher, and she made minute adjustments for wind drift and bullet drop at the extended range. This shot would require every bit of skill she possessed. The rifle bucked against her shoulder as she fired, her sixth shot of the engagement directed at a target that posed an immediate and deadly threat to multiple American personnel. Through her scope, she watched as the figure dropped the RPG launcher and fell motionless among the rocks where he had been positioning for his own attack. "Target down," Sarah reported through the radio, her voice steady despite the significance of what she had just accomplished. "Outstanding shooting, Overwatch." Rodriguez's voice carried genuine admiration for the precision marksmanship that had just eliminated a significant threat to the extraction operation. The helicopters completed their landing and pickup procedures without incident, and Sarah watched through her scope as the 6 SEAL operators boarded the aircraft that would carry them safely away from the dangerous valley where they had completed their mission and survived a carefully planned ambush. As the helicopters disappeared into the distance, Sarah began her own preparation for withdrawal from her position. She had remained in the same general area for over 12 hours, far longer than doctrine recommended for sniper operations in hostile territory. The effectiveness of her intervention during the firefight had been decisive, but it had also revealed her general location to enemy forces who would likely be searching for her position. Sarah carefully packed her equipment and prepared for the challenging movement to her own extraction site, located several kilometers away through terrain that offered good concealment but would require several hours of careful movement to traverse safely. She had sufficient water and food for the journey, and her physical conditioning was excellent, but moving alone through hostile territory would require constant vigilance and careful route selection. As she began her movement away from the position that had been her home for the past 12 hours, Sarah found herself thinking about the letter she would write to her younger brother David when she returned to base. How could she possibly explain what had transpired in this remote Afghan valley? How could she describe the weight of responsibility that came with holding the lives of other people in the crosshairs of a rifle scope? The movement to her extraction point proceeded without incident, with Sarah using every bit of fieldcraft she had learned during her training to remain undetected by any hostile forces that might be searching for the sniper who had caused such significant casualties during the afternoon's engagement. The terrain was challenging, but her physical conditioning and navigation skills proved adequate for the task. As darkness fell over the mountains, Sarah reached her designated extraction point where she would wait for her own helicopter pickup. The landing zone was located in a small clearing surrounded by steep terrain that would make approach difficult for ground forces while providing adequate space for helicopter operations. While waiting for extraction, Sarah had time to reflect more fully on the events of the day. She had engaged 6 targets during the mission, with each shot contributing directly to the successful completion of the SEAL team's objective and their safe withdrawal from hostile territory. Her intervention had been decisive in preventing what could have been a catastrophic loss of elite special operations personnel. The sound of her extraction helicopter approaching brought Sarah back to the immediate present. As she prepared for pickup, she conducted a final radio check to confirm that all coalition forces had been successfully extracted from the area and that no personnel remained in immediate danger from the hostile forces that had attempted the ambush. Base, this is Overwatch. Mission complete. All friendly forces successfully extracted. 6 hostile targets engaged and neutralized during the operation. The helicopter landing was executed flawlessly by pilots who had conducted hundreds of similar operations in challenging terrain and hostile environments. As Sarah boarded the aircraft, she felt the profound relief that came with the completion of a dangerous mission and the knowledge that her performance had directly contributed to saving American lives. During the flight back to base, Sarah found herself looking out at the darkened mountains below and thinking about the complexity of modern warfare. Small units operating independently in remote locations face threats that could emerge from any direction at any time, requiring individual operators to make split-second decisions with life-or-death consequences. The debrief that would follow her return would analyze every aspect of the mission, identifying lessons learned and areas for improvement in tactics, techniques, and procedures. Sarah knew that her performance would be thoroughly examined, not as criticism, but as part of the continuous process of improvement that characterized elite military units. As the helicopter approached the base, Sarah could see the lights of the compound that represented safety and security after a day of intense danger and responsibility. Soon she would be able to shower, eat a hot meal, and begin the process of writing the detailed report that would document every aspect of the mission for analysis by intelligence personnel and operational commanders. But, even as she looked forward to these simple comforts, Sarah knew that this mission had changed her in ways that she was only beginning to understand. She had proven to herself and others that her training was sufficient for the demands of real combat, but she had also learned that the weight of such responsibility was something that would stay with her long after the immediate mission was complete. The helicopter touched down softly on the landing pad, and Sarah gathered her equipment for the walk back to her quarters. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and possibly new missions, but tonight she could rest with the knowledge that when American lives had depended on her skill and judgment, she had not been found wanting.